Hey, everybody, welcome back into Late Night Baseball. We have a special edition for you this week, a little extra edition, because we're joined by Justin Havens. A lot of you probably know him as Jay Hay from the Underdog MLB team, specifically the Baseball is Dead show. Justin, appreciate you coming on and hanging out with us in the middle of a Guardians game, no less.
Yeah, the beginning of the rivalry weekend, right, with the Reds.
The rivalry with the
Yeah,
Reds.
we'll
Yep.
we'll call
And
it
the
we'll
Red
call it
Sox
that.
rivalry with the Braves.
Yep. If the league wants to call it that, we'll call it that. But yeah, in the middle of the Guardians game, gearing up for a good night of baseball, Friday night, maybe my favorite night to watch baseball, actually. So I'm looking forward to it, and
Yeah.
this is a great way to get started. Thanks for having me on.
Heck yeah. Well, we appreciate you making the time. A lot of stuff going on right now. And honestly, when Parker reached out to you, I said, you need to get him on here because the shit's hitting the fan in baseball all over the place. And one of the things I got to ask you out of the gate here, because I know you have strong opinions on it.
Hmm.
Pete Rose, Hall
Yeah.
of Famer, right? Right? Definitely.
Certainly, if you were looking at his baseball reference page, you would think Hall of Famer. Absolutely. I guess if we're splitting hairs, I happen to think that just based on his statistical resume, I think Pete Rose is a little bit overrated. I think there's a lot of people who casual fans when they think of the greatest players in the last 50 years, a lot of those people will name Pete Rose because he's the hit king. Yeah, but on merit, yes, a Hall of Famer. But for me, the question is a lot more complicated than that, and it goes well beyond the reason that he was on the ineligible list, which is, of course, gambling on baseball. To me, that's not even the most problematic thing that we're dealing with. So,
Hmm.
like, should he get in? I'm not really sure. My personal opinion on the matter is that I hope he does not.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Parker.
I fall really like in lockstep with you, kind of. Like I feel like the Hall has a lot of explaining to do if they let Pete Rose in. Kurt Schilling's, in my opinion, basically not a Hall of Famer because he's an asshole, and he has way less convicted charges and things like that are absolutely proven and admitted to that he's done. We've got all the steroid era guys like Manny Ramirez, Alex Rodriguez, people who are not in the Hall of Fame that I think really should be before a guy like Pete Rose, especially when, like, I think you made a point earlier on your show. He just hasn't shown any sort of feeling sorry, didn't show any sort of
Yeah,
feeling sorry about it at
Yeah.
all. Like
Yeah.
literally said, get over it in 2024 in an article that Don Van Natta put up on ESPN.com.
yeah. So, like, if not you, but like if the listener is, or the general you, if you're a person where you don't care at all what a person did off the field, you think it is all about what they did on the baseball field, and that is what the Hall of Fame is about, then you are going to view every single candidate a certain way.
Mhm.
Me, I don't necessarily feel like that because you know, bad human beings were put into the Hall of Fame 100 years ago, that we necessarily need to continue with that tradition now, given that the Hall of Fame is on some level a reflection of, the current societies or the current times values, at least as it relates to baseball and sports. And um, we have spent the last 20 years, I mean, I guess in the voting cycle, maybe a little bit less than that, but for the most part, the better part of 2 decades, making sure that people who used performance enhancing drugs were not allowed into the Hall of Fame. And I don't really agree with that for the most part. I understand the guys who tested positive and broke rules once they were on the
Mm-hmm.
books. I understand that being a line for people. That's fine. Um, but for me, like, I just this idea that they need to be honored, that they need to be elevated into the Hall of Fame. I think Dallas brought it up. Dallas Braden brought it up on the Baseball is Dead podcast, that there is a section of the Hall of Fame that includes memorabilia. It includes
Mm-hmm.
pieces of history from signature events or careers that, allow us to tell the history of baseball, separate but connected to the plaque section, right? And
Right.
I
Yeah.
just the point about the lack of contrition that Parker brought up is, like, that's not to me why somebody shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame, but like, I just don't understand anyone. I guess I come down on the idea that like, I don't understand people who are intensely behind the Pete Rose for the Hall of Fame campaign. Like, I'm not
Right.
going to spend the next 2.5 years until he's actually eligible to be on the ballot and will be voted on December of 27. I'm not going to spend the time between now and then thinking a lot about it. I'm really not.
Right.
I'm probably going to, after this news cycle passes, I'm probably going to think about the Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame thing in like November of 2027. That's when I'll start thinking
Yeah.
about it again. And the people who really passionately believe that Pete Rose has been wronged or belongs in the Hall of Fame, I just think it's weird. He wasn't
It's a weird
sorry.
hill to die on.
It is.
Totally.
He wasn't sorry. He was like an active creep basically up until like, he stopped appearing in public for all we can tell. Like, and I just don't find it to be a very sympathetic case, and I'm not going to waste any energy like advocating for him being in the Hall of Fame when, as we've said, there's a backlog of people that belong, and some of those are spotless track records that just belong in the Hall of Fame and haven't gotten in. Some of them are steroid tainted, and I just believe that, to say there's like a pecking order of the way that it should go makes me feel a little uncomfortable. But from the Hall of Fame standpoint, it feels like an optics disaster to have Pete Rose be elected to the Hall of Fame and have Bonds, Clemens, A-Rod, Manny still either just off the ballot or waiting for their committee or whatever it might be. That, to me, I think the Hall of Fame, if you'd given them truth serum, and then I'll shut up for a second, like, I think if you'd given them truth serum, they would have said that they wished Pete Rose would have remained on the ineligible list and that Manfred would have come down on the other side of this, because this makes the situation much more difficult for the Hall of Fame.
It's easier not to make a decision. I would love that, right? Everyone loves to not, kick the can down the road, but
of course,
it feels like that's what Manfred did. He was like, all right, you guys decide.
Yeah. Well, I mean, right, they can kick it to each other at that point, right? Obviously. But I one of the things that I come back to, Parker, is what we talked about earlier this week, where we talked about who's actually voting for a guy like Pete Rose, right? I mean, we're looking at the era's committees, who's going to be voting on Pete Rose, that classic era committee. So honestly, we talked about this earlier. I trust that group of people to make an informed decision better than I do a group of writers, number one.
See, that's interesting. I completely disagree with you. I really completely disagree, because we got into this for a second on Baseball's Dead, but not very long. I think the sheer number of people that vote in the BBWA, like the classic Hall of Fame path, I think that would have watered down the sentiment for Pete Rose. I think the likelihood that we've got a committee filled with, let's just say 12, 16 people, and 9 of them are contemporaries in some form of Pete Rose, I think that's a much more like, and I could be wrong, this is just an opinion, right? But I think that's a more forgiving environment for Pete Rose to get himself into the Hall of Fame than having 425 people or whatever it is vote on the process.
We talked about this last night on our show, actually, where we were like, okay, it's a 12 to 16 person committee. Breakfast conversations over the course of a week can sway a jury. Like this is actually something that could happen. They could talk themselves into electing Pete Rose into the Hall of Fame just on such a small scale because it's so concentrated.
Well, and historically, and this goes back to like, pre-war guys, like in large part, but it persists to this day. Like if you look at some of the very worst selections for the Hall of Fame, they have come through these specialized committees over the years who have, whatever era they felt was underrepresented, generally, not all the time, but generally.
You could say his name.
Well, I mean, Harold Baines is obviously an example. That's an example of this.
First off, everyone calm down, okay?
Yeah. That's an example of this, but like, as much fun as I have with that, the tradition of these committees electing underqualified candidates, I'm pretty sure is substantially higher than the BBWAA's track record of electing underqualified candidates. So
yeah, that's a fair point. That's a really fair point. Harold Baines, I mean, I will admit, absolutely, that is a Reinsdorf shill of an Hall of Fame election. I get that. But one of the things that made me, even think about the fact that these kind of era committees could potentially do just as good or a better job than the writers in the first place was it actually an interesting article I saw, what was it, the other day on The Athletic, where a couple of the writers went ahead and actually asked 12 current Hall of Famers. And I got the impression reading that this is going to be the most controversial selection in history, no doubt, and that any group of people, this era's committee, the writers, us three Joe Schmoes of baseball fans, are going to be 50-50 on this. I think most of the time.
Yeah, I think you got a good point there. I like it that you pointed out he's a stat patter because I didn't pull it out. I didn't come up with this. It was all over Twitter. But I mean, to point out that in the last from age 38 to 45, he racked up 1,100 hits basically to the tune of 0.2 WAR per season. It's like, yeah, I don't know, man. Like it's definitely one of those counting stats inductions, even if you just go on the numbers alone.
Yeah, and like, listen, if you were just looking at the numbers, like I'm not suggesting that he doesn't belong statistically. I'm not saying like he's overrated in the sense that he shouldn't be there. I'm just saying that, I think I think there is an age of fan who will recall Pete Rose in a way that romanticizes the way that he played, which enhances, kind of the memory of what kind of player he actually was. And, like I'll just draw an example of a contemporary of his and a teammate. Like I'm not sure, I might be wrong, but I'm not sure if you asked like who was a greater baseball player, Mike Schmidt or Pete Rose. Like I think that answer, again, among baseball fans, but casual baseball fans, I think that end up being much more split. Whereas I think the correct answer is like super obvious. I think it's the greatest third baseman of all time. So like, so that's just an example that popped into my head. But I think I would not vote for him if I was given a ballot. And I think I think you're justified in withholding that vote on a lot of grounds. Yeah,
absolutely. I think Parker and I are probably with you there, right, Parker?
Yeah, absolutely. Good news is though, there is another guy that got unbanned that's like way less controversial. Still a little controversy there, but I think we can all agree that Shoeless Joe belongs in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't really have a passionate take on Shoeless Joe Jackson's Hall of Fame candidacy. Like, I think people have gone back through the record and I believe documented there is compelling evidence that Shoeless Joe Jackson knew what was happening in the 1919 World Series. And, so if there's a level of, being complicit with it, then, I'm honestly, even though they are off the ineligible list, I am perfectly fine with somebody who responds to their candidacies with no, thank you. Like,
yeah,
I'm good. Like, I don't think this player belongs in the Hall of Fame, even if they've decided that the ineligible, like, because here, I guess we can move on after this, but like, because I don't want to belabor the point on my end at least, but you guys can follow up for sure. I don't want to like confuse the ineligible list thing. Like they are not off the ineligible list because their crimes or whatever were deemed like not accurate or an overreaction or whatever. It was basically a technical interpretation of the rule
of lifetime ban.
Yeah, that said it ends at the end of life. And so now, to your guys' point at the very beginning, Manfred has said it's now your decision because the only reason people care about this is the Hall of Fame now. So like, it's now your decision for better or worse, and I guess we'll see where it goes. And if you guys are happy with this episode, then happy to come back for Pete Rose's induction if it happens, or the December 2027 revisit of this topic.
Guaranteed. We'll have to do that. And let's not pretend here, guys, that like just because they're reinstated that everyone changed their mind about this. Like that's also not happening. You know what I mean? Like no one's going to go, oh, well, he's reinstated now, so I'm definitely putting him in. That's not happening.
No, and you know what's funny? I have family members that if they listen to this are going to be like, I thought that you wanted Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame. Because for years I think I looked through those same rose tinted glasses we talked about earlier. But then just, and more stuff comes out. And as this ruling came out and over the last couple of years with, since he was the first person to place a bet in the Cincinnati sports book. And it's like, wow, this is just not. When I was a kid, it made more sense to put him in the Hall of Fame than it does now, I think. Because it's not somebody I want my son being like, yeah, I'm going to be like Pete Rose.
Yeah, true. Jay, hey, this stuff going on in Boston with Devers, like, I mean, help us sort this out. Is this like, hey, Devers, I hear what you're saying, or are we in ass hat territory? Well, what's going on here?
I mean, I'm definitely sympathetic to his situation to an extent, to a certain point, and then I just kind of have to hop off. I am appreciative of the fact that he feels lied to, he feels misled. I think those are probably like legitimate, justified sentiments on his end. I don't think that's like made up out of thin air. And so he can be frustrated. And I do appreciate on some level like a just general resistance to wanting to change at a point like this is not the off season, all the things that he brought up. But like, not to be cliche, but at the end of the day, I still feel like as a person being paid $300 million, and somebody who is currently like occupying a DH spot, which again, I understand at the request, the demand of the club initially, like the situation changed. Like the depth question, I just feel like we've sort of lost the plot with the depth question where it's like, oh, they should have had more depth at first base. They should have had more depth at first base. What team, what organization has depth at first base where you could lose the star or whatever, or the cornerstone first baseman and replace that person and be like, let's fucking go, and be like fully satisfied with the option that you have. Like, I know there are instances where guys have replaced those players and had streaks where they were successful, like Dom Smith being a recent example in Boston, but like there are really no examples of like high level players just waiting in backup roles at first base, waiting for a guy to get. So the situation changed, and I feel like Devers has just like, I just at the end of the day feel like his approach to this is fine. It's kind of loser stuff. At like it just reaches a point where I just lose a lot of sympathy for him. And I like the Christian Campbell news is obviously the the refresh on this news item. So I don't think we're not beating a dead horse, I don't think, by talking about the Devers situation here on May 16th, with Campbell working out at first base. And I saw some replies. I fired off some tweet earlier today when I saw that, and one of the replies that stuck with me was this person that said it's a lot easier to ask Christian Campbell to move as a young. Let me. You know what? Hold on one second. If somebody wants if somebody wants to edit this out, that's fine. But I'm going to read it.
No, that's fine. No worries.
Easy for a young middle infielder to move. Not as easy for a half decent shape, average third baseman. And so, like, obviously, athletically, I understand the concept of that idea. But my response to that is, why is it easier for a less proven player trying to keep his head above water in his very first taste of the big leagues to make that change mid-season, as opposed to asking somebody whose main concern is just a question of athleticism, at least as it represents by this question, right? And so, like, I think we've sort of like it, to me, it's a much harder ask of Christian Campbell, who is just not established.
He sucked recently, by the way.
Yeah, then it is to, he's on a cold streak. He's like, I get it. There's the quote unquote counter to this, which is he's doing anything he can to stay in the major leagues, whereas Devers doesn't have to do that. And my counter to that would be, he does not have to do that, as we're seeing, but I feel like that is what a good leader would do. And if he doesn't want to do it because he feels betrayed, that's fine. I just think he still should, and he should take his issues with the front office or the coaching staff or the combination and deal with that like in a parallel path. You know what I mean? Even if him
Yep.
moving to first base bails them out in his head in the interim. I just feel like that's what a good teammate would do. And this is a team
Yes.
attempting to win at the highest level. They're not doing so currently. And moving to first base, him would free up like a positional logjam in some ways. There are other people who could move that would help that too. Like Story could move. Story could move to second. Like there was, to make room for Meyer. Like I get all of that, but I just feel like Devers' approach has not been a super sympathetic one, even in something of a sympathetic case.
Yeah. So I love the point you made earlier about how you can't just lose your cornerstone first baseman and expect there to be depth there to fill that void. But the part that makes it so fucking frustrating for me as a Red Sox fan is the Red Sox actually kinda are uniquely positioned to have that depth to fill that hole, like almost organically within their system, being that they have Rafael Devers, who owns a glove that's made of leather. Like he's able to go out there and play the position. And then it's like, boom, now we can maybe resurrect Masataka Yoshida from the dead, or call up Roman Anthony and start cycling him in a DH and in the outfield kind of role or something like that. And I think that this becomes a little more interesting because I like the move to move Christian Campbell to first base, not because of what it means for Christian Campbell, but for what it means. I don't know if you saw, but Marcelo Myers making the start tonight in AAA at second base. So like
I actually
this
had not seen that.
Yeah, so he's starting tonight in AAA at second base. This will be like his 6th, 7th, 8th, something like that game, playing the position at the professional level. But like that does, give you the opportunity to move people around. I just wish that the guy that was the one the team believed in and the one that they gave the money after letting so many people walk was more willing to fill a hole that did not happen because we were like, hey, you know what would be a novel idea if we just killed Tristan Casas and put Devers in first base? No, Tristan Casas destroyed his knee and maybe his career. And this is what we're looking for from the guy who's supposedly like a clubhouse leader or is getting paid really to be so. And it's just not what we're seeing from him. So that's the part that's really disappointing to me.
Yeah, I think I just like, people can look at the same thing and see things two totally different ways. And I just feel like I see some people hold up the idea he's paid all this money, man. This isn't his fucking job. Like this is, I see a guy who's making 300 million and I still, maybe this is an old man take at this point, but I feel like I'm usually very pro player. I see that and I think that's a reason he should do this, not a reason he shouldn't. And you can see it the exact opposite way, I suppose, but I obviously don't.
I mean, and Parker, I told you this earlier. Both things can be true, right? Like you could be a good teammate and do a temporary thing and not feel great about it, right? I mean, Devers could do that. I think more than anything, my frustration, and I think, Jay kind of mentioned this earlier, is the maturity, right? Or I guess the lack thereof, right? Like if you're going to go and air out your grievances on your freaking GM, come on, we're not doing this. Like that's the issue. You need to go to Breslow, have the conversation, be a man about it. And again, you could still be upset and still be a good teammate. Those things can exist together.
For sure. And I do. That's a good point because, he didn't just say no, or he wasn't just asked, are you going to move to first base? And him say, no, next question. He was, I'm not like a chain of command person necessarily all the time, but I do feel like if you're going to call your boss basically like a moron, somebody who doesn't know how to do his job, like, why don't you do your job? That sort of sentiment. Yeah. I don't know that is almost by definition a level of lack of professionalism, and you can put whatever stock you want to put into that. I don't typically put a ton into it for baseball players, but I don't think it helps. And this is a team that's, they're not 30, they're not 38 and 11, you know what I mean? Or 33 and 11. No, I guess we played 44, 45 games, 33 and 11. They are, they're floating around or below 500. And, sometimes that gets a little uncomfortable, and Devers is not willing to get uncomfortable, at least beyond his initial concession of going to DH.
I know we got to get you out of here, but I had one more thing another thing that infuriated me is So John Henry flies to Kansas City, has this meeting with Devers. I assume that was some sort of conversation, and this is just conjecture and assumptions on my part, of like, hey, dude, I'm paying you. You're going to do what we tell you to do. Or at least you're not going to talk to my guy that way. You're talking to my guy all wrong or something like that. The part that is crazy to me is that since that conversation, we have not seen Rafael Devers even fake the funk, go out there with a first baseman's mitt and just play like shit on the practice field and then not get put at first base. We haven't seen anything. So it seems like, okay, the whiny baby's getting his way. And what does that say about the clubhouse environment? Like you said, the chain of command environment, like what actually, I think this is something that's not really being talked about. I don't love the implication that the guy just said no. And that's actually just we're going with that.
Yeah, I think that's it's a good point. I sort of expected a little bit more action coming out of the ownership flying to see him. I think just my gut, I'm willing to give that just a beat for a second. I'm willing to give that. And if listen, if in a month from now, like it's still, they're fucking around and having to try to figure out solutions because Rafael Devers isn't willing to do anything, then, we can revisit this or we can say that this take was wrong. But there's something about it that makes me feel like it's not just John Henry not having Craig Breslow's back. That would feel, I mean, it's possible. It just feels like maybe there is a piece or two of information that we don't have yet that will be key for this. And I'm willing to give it a second before I come down on that one.
Is there a general manager position in baseball?
Yeah.
Is there a general manager position in baseball that tends to live on thinner ice than the one in Boston?
Yeah, it's a good point. Like post Theo, right? Like it's been a little bit of a turnstile. That's a good question. Is there a front office that lives in more?
It's not the White Sox, I'll tell you that much.
More constant peril. I would say, the only team, just quickly scanning all of the baseball teams to refresh my memories, I think the only team that would compare maybe is the Marlins. I feel like, and that's not a great comparison, right? So,
no. but it does play.
Yeah, and there's been like a few like full on, administration turnovers there. I can't recall many examples. There are no examples of a front office that had sustained success because the Marlins have never had sustained success. So, cool. The Marlins.
I hope
that. Yeah, sorry.
That'll work. I'll take that all day. I'm not sure if Boston loves it, but I'll take it. Hey, Jay, this was awesome, man. Thank you for coming on and joining us. And you know what? Next time you're on, it'll either be November 2027 for Pete Rose, or when the relationship between the Red Sox and Devers frays and they're trading him, maybe you can come back when that happens too.
Yes, absolutely. If they trade Rafael Devers, I pledge that if you guys want, I will pop back on and we'll see what his new life is all about. But yeah, no, thanks for having me. This was fun. Went by very quickly, and looking forward to future visits.
Subway Series and good. Garrett Crochet versus Sale coming right now for me.
Yes. Quick plug-ola by me at the end. If you're not already a fan, please, in addition to this lovely podcast, please give some time to Baseball is Dead. And please also give some time to SLAB Lab if you have not checked that out. Dallas is doing really good project. Stuff over there. If you love pitching, conversations, getting real deep into it. Video series on our YouTube page, Underdog MLB is our main page, and then SLAB Lab Show is that. So please check those out. And again, thank you guys for having me.
Thanks,
awesome,
man.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. We'll catch you next week here on Late Night Baseball.